Hey everybody, it's the Mad Master here. I'm doing a video. This one is kind of a reaction, sort of a reaction video to Quantum of Conscience's recent blueprint for how people get awakened to the truth. Because I have a very different narrative that I have followed and lived in my life. So, in one of his recent videos, he talks about how the mainstream is liberal and then goes conservative on this rabbit hole to believe in conspiracy culture and then the truth. That hasn't been my experience. um Now it may be more likely nowadays because of how things have evolved or devolved in our political culture and our left right paradigm. Really how it evolved with me is that it was coming from a very left wing point of view. And to give you an example, I mentioned that there was a family friend that lived with us with my family growing up, and he was very, I would say, he was somewhat red pilled to the reality that we were living in. From a very left wing point of view, uh, he criticized the Iraq War, the original one, and that's when I was kind of starting to wake up. Um, and that was from they're in it for the oil, blah 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 blah, and that's from a very left wing point of view. Dare I say, like, anti-capitalist point of view. And that, the next thing that kind of down that rabbit hole I went into was the JFK movie that came out from Oliver Stone in 1992. And that was coming from a very left wing point of view. We all know that Oliver Stone is definitely on the left. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, went to visit fucking Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro. Criticize him, you may. I'm not giving him credit for doing that. I'm just saying that that's coming from a very left wing point of view. Um, it's also apparent that reading Noam Chomsky has awakened. And he in one of his videos he criticizes Howard Zinn, and Howard Zinn deserves plenty of criticism. I won't lie, as Noam Chomsky does, but they are closer to the truth than the mainstream MSNBC people he talks about in his video. A lot closer than even possibly Fox News at certain points, especially during the Iraq War and 9/11 and all that. It's like 7-Eleven is part-time job, as he calls it. I get it from him because I think it's hilarious. I actually did tell the joke on Facebook years ago, but 7-Eleven was people laughed at that one. But the 9/11 thing, like, was very coming from a very left-wing point of view. You had the mainstream version of it with Michael Moore, and then you had the less mainstream version of it with even people like Alex Jones and stuff. So that's the problem with his narrative, is that that's not how I became a true, more into the truth thing. Was definitely from a left-wing point of view. It was coming into it from that. And Alex Jones used to have a lot of left-wing people on his show. For example, Cindy Sheehan, what's his name, Greg Palast, he used to have on there. Webster Tarpley in some ways was actually very frequent guest, and he's very much on the left, other than like some of his conspiracy stuff about global or climate change. He's like basically a left winger, former LaRouche guy that became a skeptic of everything, including climate change. But it's a little, now he's just babbling about Trump all the time. That's the problem with him. But I know why they had a falling out, sort of. Henry Rollins, he might have had Jello Biafra on there. I can't remember. He had a lot of different left wing people on there. So I mean, I did not come to the truth thing from the right, from becoming a Republican. On the contrary, the Republicans, the Dick Cheneys, the all these think tanks, the Project New American Century, all the neocons. That was the enemy, and I'm coming from the left, or the left, into that point of view. So I think he's wrong in his assumption. Now, today, in this modern time, yes, he's right about that, because the conspiracy stuff is more of a Republican right wing thing to some extent. But back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, it definitely was not. I'm not saying it was left wing either. It was kind of a dissident left wing plus libertarian, quote unquote libertarian uh, point of view, because there were, 'cause obviously Alex Jones was more of a libertarian even when he was having his left wing guests about, talking about Iraq and 9/11 and all that. And JFK, you can have JFK, um, uh, Watergate, you have Iran Contra, you have 9/11, all Republican led stuff, right? And there's a book, what is it called? Uh, it was about Bush. It was about the Bushes, the Bush dynasty, trying to family of secrets. It was a very left wing reporter that wrote that, and he was kind of tying out a lot of that stuff together. I don't know if he sort of tied 9/11 together, but he was a little bit. It seemed like he was a little more hesitant about that one. But even from the Watergate perspective, he said that was sort of it could have been a kind of a psyop kind of thing going on with that, where they kind of blackmailed Nixon into this whole thing because he was like more of a threat to the system than. I know you'd have to read it. It's been years since I read it, so yeah. The point is that I don't think him saying, "Oh, the liberals are the ones that are zombies." It's like, yeah, well, back in fucking 2002, the Republican right wingers were the ones who were the zombies, dude. And maybe it's just the time that he got into the truther culture, but yeah. So I don't think he's right as far as the time frame. Maybe now, QAnon and even people that get into a lot of these ideas aren't really on the left anymore. I guess I'm kind of an anomaly at this point because it's like I've been into a lot of this stuff so long that I seem like an outlier, an outcast, which I revel in actually, but because I did come from the left into a lot of these ideas, but even like the Jimmy Dores of the world and stuff, and Glenn Greenwald's or whatever, they're coming from the left, but they're definitely not coming from the mainstream left at all, and they go to the edge of conspiracy but don't quite jump off that cliff. Whereas I definitely jump off that cliff. I'm still hanging by a thread, of course. I don't totally fall into that. So I'm kind of on the fence, a little bit. But it's like, I like to be scientific about all that stuff and try to see, I don't think like people are consciously all thinking the same thing. It's more groupthink and more confluence of factors, as Alex Berenson says about conspiracy with the current crisis. He doesn't think it's a conspiracy, he thinks it's a confluence. Very good. I highly recommend the full Joe Rogan interview with him recently about everything. So, yeah, I don't think Quantum of Conscience, or Matt McKinley, his real name, I don't think he's correct about how people get into truth culture overall, like through time. And maybe in modern times, that is more closer to the truth, unfortunately. And I think to blame for that is the whole Obama thing, because like the Obama is like he's a hero, he's a savior, change. You know, he comes in, he's mediocre as far as change goes, and then the whole like left wing or the right wing Tea Party, that evolved into all this stuff, gets more and more into conspiracy culture and claims conspiracy culture for their own, basically co-ops it. What's the word? Appropriates it. That's right. They appropriated conspiracy culture because it definitely wasn't necessarily left, but it definitely wasn't like mainstream Republican either. That's the problem I have with that video about from Matt McKinley, because conspiracy stuff was never mainstream right wing. In fact, some of the people that invented terms like deep state were on the left. That's where those concepts come from. I mean, these concepts come from, a lot of these ideas come from the new left, quote unquote, the new left from the late 60s. Anarchists, and a lot of them are Marxists, for better or worse. You know, these people are like the system, man, the system, they're in control. The man, they call it the man. I mean, the deep state is the same thing as the man, as they use the slang term for the establishment back in the day. So he's wrong. I mean, his little chart where on the top, you're a zombie liberal, quote unquote. I mean, liberal and left are two different things. Let's just face it. I mean, it's not it's not really said. It's unspoken thing. Even on the left, they talk about liberals. Like shit. Trotskyites talk about liberals and how liberals are just like gradualist fucking sheep and stuff like that. So that's about all.